Hutus and Tutsis. If you look at Rwanda today, they are considered one of the most progressive and one of the countries to look at, not just for Africa, but for the future. Their digital literacy is so much better. The number of women ministers is the highest in Africa and higher than many other countries around the world. Development, housing, all planned. Economy is growing much better. So, you know, I found out about this because, you know, you are on Bloomberg, yeah, and Financial Times and so on. You know, in the last 1 year, there has been a lot of focus on how exactly Rwanda did it. And because we all forgot about Rwanda because of whatever we know about Rwanda 15, 20 years ago, we forgot that out of that destruction, somehow quietly, they have managed to restructure their country, focus, that they are now considered as the Silicon Valley of Africa. So to answer Andrew, whether or not we have come to the point of no return, you know, we are far, far away from ever coming to the point that Rwanda was. So I don't think Malaysia now is a case of point of no return. In fact, the good thing about Malaysians generally as a society, we constantly raise the alarm bell. The bigger danger for the country is that we have Malaysians who easily accept things as they are and do not question and do not revise and do not compare. The problem that we have now is that it's a question of missed potential more than anything else. Other countries with the kind of strengths that we have would have done a lot more, would have been able to become in the top 20 in the world, maybe top 10, maybe top 15. And we certainly should be in a position to be at the leading table of at least Southeast Asia. But what we have seen in the last 20 years, 30 years is that we continue to slide at the time when other countries are coming up. You know, so we have fallen behind definitely Singapore, Indonesia. We have fallen behind Thailand and now Vietnam. And we are now basically fighting to be ahead of Philippines. And they all have different circumstances that were far more difficult than us. They were ravaged by war. Philippines, for example, is very prone to natural disasters. They were much poorer. They didn't inherit a good education system at independence compared to what we have. You know? So it's a question of missed opportunities more than anything else, especially given how dynamic global competition is. Everything is so intertwined, and then capital moves so much freely now than before. The search for efficiency, for content, for value is a lot more challenging now compared to what it was 20, 30 years before. So at the end of the day, it is a question that are we willing to see the younger generation slides further and further down in comparison with our peers and colleagues around this region and internationally. And I think the older you are, the more memories of what we have of how we were back then and how, you know, we stand tall and we were ahead of others. So that is not an existential question. That is more about what is our wish for the future of others who come before us. Having said this, we do have 2 or 3 fault lines that if we are not careful, we get closer and closer to being economically unfeasible, because we were used to the kind of largesse we have, the kind of lifestyle we have, but financially every year, our so-called fiscal space is getting smaller and smaller. So that these 2 or 3 fault lines include, for example, if we don't rein in corruption at a high scale. Corruption happens everywhere, daripada bawah sampai ke atas. The biggest threat to Malaysia is high level, large scale corruption that we've seen one after another from one MDB. In fact, before this, when in the 80s, when we have BMFs more, but we never really took decisive steps to really rein in this, that one after another, generation after generation, we have to live with an ever ballooning amount of big corruption, from 500 million, jadi 1 billion, jadi 6 billion, jadi 50 billion. This has the far-reaching effect financially for the future, because for every single one of this scandal, it will increase public debt, it will increase indebtedness, and for every single billion that we wasted like this, every new child for the next 20 and 30 years will inherit this public debt. Of course, orang UMNO kata, mana ada, saya bukan ambil loan, YMDB tak ada kena-mengena dengan saya. But it's a question of allocation. If 50 billion has now been allocated to repay 1MDB loans for the next 30 years, that 50 billion could have been spent on schools, on hospitals, on universities. So if you add all this, that means that we pay for the lifestyle and largesse of the ruling elite that the future generation will have to inherit. I don't like to say that, it's going to be like Sri Lanka, or it's going to be like this country and that country. But that was exactly the pattern that you saw in all this country that eventually make them financially unfeasible. So once that happens, just like, our daily life, our business, our household expenditure, if you come to a stage where you are no longer insolvent, definitely your lifestyle has to change drastically to suit your insolvent status. That's exactly what happened to Sri Lanka. That's exactly what happened to some countries before. So if you're not careful, that first fault line, certain things that we took for granted in the past, if we reach that fault line, obviously things will change dramatically for the rest. Economy may grow. The country will continue to prosper and you will see things going normally, but the kind of lifestyle that a normal household used to enjoy, no more there. The kind of some of the subsidies, some of the free and very affordable health system that we have, healthcare that we have, those will be taken away one after another if we're not careful about the first fault line. So that's the reason why I usually really focus on big scandal. I'm not saying that small corruption is acceptable. It's not. But the impact for future generation, all it takes is just 2 scandals to the tune of 10 billion every year to continue to happen. And I think it's more than 10 billion every year. That's what we are going through now. That at some point, it's no longer economically and financially feasible for us to afford the kind of society services that we've had before. The second fault line that we have to grapple very quickly is a question of skill. and the question of competition. And this very much relates to education system. I mentioned about how the world is so intertwined. Before this, it's very difficult, for example, to hire people from a different country. Nowadays, companies can move from one country to another very quickly. Everything is done digitally. You may be based in Toronto, but your workforce is in Kigali in Rwanda. Wherever Intel now, for example, if we fall behind in terms of skill and competitiveness, it's very easy to uproot everything for the MNCs and for the large corporations in the world and just move it elsewhere very quickly. It's getting easier and easier. That is also the reason why you see part of the major reasons why our currency is being hammered like hell these last few months is because the inflows and outflows of capital get so much easier nowadays compared to before. Everything is done at the tip of a smartphone, there is less and less middlemen to do it. So with one small monetary, well, not small, one monetary decision that the US made, you see a huge outflow of FPIs, foreign portfolio investments, leaving our shores, and that makes it very difficult because the conventional monetary and economic tools to combat currency outflows is getting harder and harder because how the capital, everything is moving. So given the nature of the future, there's only one solution, basically to always be ahead of others, to make sure that our skills, our competitiveness, our value content of what we do is always ahead of others. And to me, that's a big fault line because while it's a lot easier to manage a gap in financing the country, because it's a question of issuing bonds and trying to get a bridging loan here and there, but managing, sustaining, and cultivating a workforce that is creative, that is competitive, that can stand on their own 2 feet, this is a question of generation. It is not something that you can do with the blink of an eye. You cannot have a band-aid for the deterioration of the economic content and the value and the competitiveness of our workforce. So if anything, that actually concerns me more than anything else. And I run a startup and I hire mostly top graduates, fresh graduates. The Gen Z and the millennials don't like it when we say this, but I do observe a certain change over the years. Back then, when I started the Gen X of my generation, is that we were more adaptable when we were thrown to a situation, that we'll find our ways to manage things, and our ability to absorb and to upskill is slightly better because we were thought to have a much longer perspective about everything else. Given that the Gen Z and millennials especially live in a world where attention span is so much shorter, it's screen and everything, their worldview is also so much shorter. Their view about career is so much shorter. So they always feel that they have options. If you are not careful, the learning curve, everything gets more difficult, then over a long period of time, the skills, the competitiveness, the content will make us less and less attractive in a global economy. And at the time when crude oil is running out, palm oil, most probably at some points, we have to make key decisions about our land use, whether you use it for commodity crop or whether you use it for food crop. that is something that will take so much longer to improve and to reverse the trajectory. So financially, I don't think that we are point of no return. But if we are not careful, we just become less and less attractive over the years, that eventually the younger generation no longer has the opportunities that we used to have when we were at their age. Okay? That's a long one. Any other questions?
Hi, Vijay, Rafizi.
Yeah.
You are much welcome in Penang. A lot of my friends are very disappointed because they didn't know about this event.
Oh, sorry, it's a short notice.
Yeah, I guess as much because even we just knew about it yesterday, and
Yeah.
I put off some stuff and straight away came here, firstly. So this place is quite well known. The last time, Auditorium A, the last time Bersama came, and it was fully packed because people were informed. And this time, I think the entrance wasn't well lit, and we spent 10 to 15 minutes looking for the entrance. So it's not the place. So it's a bit of a logistical administration, because we really want to hear you.
Yeah.
I think, thank you for elaborating on the youth. Since they are a big part of GE15, how do we move forward? Because the system is so corrupt. And when leaders are corrupt, it rots from the head, the top. No matter what decisions they make from business, economic, social, education, and even our cultural life, they cannot make wise decisions because they are corrupt. So if we don't deal with corruption, like you say, from top to bottom and bottom to top, and it becomes a way of life, it's very hard for us to move forward, I think. And if you could share something about how do we deal with that, and how do we educate our young people that you cannot say apa malu, bosku, because you have to be malu. You know, kleptocrats, and it's so embarrassing. So if our children are taught that it's okay, if somebody steals billions and is upper malu, and the poor farmer, the poor person who steals a loaf of bread and immediately put into jail, and people who steal so much money can walk about freely. So it doesn't make sense. And how do we get our young people to say this is unacceptable? You know, and I hope that you have plans to encourage the young. We were all very gung-ho for you, Nurul, and the whole gang, you know, GE14, and we look forward to that again. And we can do it. And I'm hopeful, and I want to stay hopeful for Malaysia and for our young people. Thank you.
Let me start with this Apa Malu Bosku, you know. So the thing about political communication, which I think Najib has learned very well ever since he got booted out, and you also observe the same thing in the US with Trump, you know, because of social media, it's really easy to skew so-called the impression of what the public thinks. And that's why, you know, over the last 3 to 4 years, Meta, Facebook, has been under intense pressure to make sure that more are done to, I wouldn't say regulate, but to close some loopholes where some vested interests can skew the whole perspective of society. That's exactly, I think, what happens with Najib and Apa Malu, Bosku, and so on. Whatever perhaps you see in terms of how gung-ho some people feel about Najib and idolizing him and so on, I don't think it was ever a reflection of what society feels, especially the Malays. Since 2018, among the monthly questions, you know, because we run monthly surveys that meets the scientific and statistical requirements in terms of randomized samplings, in terms of representativeness. I don't know about other politicians. I don't like to shoot in the dark, because I also come in as a politician with some level of inquisitiveness. I actually want to know what people think. So that's why surveys and data, it's my bread and butter. It allows me to be ahead of the curve to understand. So one of the things that we constantly ask is what the public thinks about Najib's corruption case. And then since last month, immediately after the sentencing, whether or not the public agreed with the sentencing. Ever since late 2018, when we started tracking, 80% of Malays actually think Najib was guilty. So to say that Malay generally endorse corruption, or they feel they are representative of this upper Malu Bosku, is actually not true. And that's also why I cautions everyone generally. We have to be very guarded and careful to differentiate between Najib's media propaganda and what's exactly transpire among Malays generally. So there's no question that by and large, Malay voters in this country reject corruption. That's true. No one's like corruption, because after Najib's 9 years, people started to feel the effect of corruption on their daily lives. Every single one was affected, budget cuts, all the way from primary school to universities, those who are professors and lecturers, they knew how the budget was cut year after year. So coming from that perspective, right, that's why I always feel one of the very important tasks of politicians like me is to get everyone to stay on the course for a longer perspective, because it's a work in progress. Sometimes we forget that prior to 2008, it was unthinkable that UMNO could have been lodged, or UMNO could have lost 2/3. We achieved it maybe by fluke in 2008, but then we worked on it and we started focusing one compartment after another. Some of it is psyche issues, some of it is cultural, some of it is systemic. After 2018, despite whatever happens, I think there were enough signals to many branches of the government, including the civil servants, including the judiciary, including the authorities, to understand that the public by and large will support any parties that stand up against corruption. Of course, some people are still part of the system. As in any group, some people want to do things better. But it is a work in progress. And I tell this to almost everyone who know me. I suppose the difference between, how I carried out things with others is that while I know all these problems, all the potential pitfalls, I choose to focus on the positive ones and work on those positive, because that keeps you going. That builds the momentum. So as much as we know there are pockets of people all over the place that are a part and parcels of the old system, and they will try to maneuver to slow down the reform, we also know there are many others who will try their best to move and do their own bits in the little spheres that they have to move this country forward, away from corruption, towards better institutional check and balance. And sometimes we don't realize what we have seen so far. For example, Najib been sentenced, Rosmah been sentenced, is actually a product of that. A product of different parts of society moving forward, doing things in their own sphere. And they could only do that because they were confident enough that the public is with them. Of course, the problem being part of Malaysian society is that more often than not, our headlines and also our political contestation revolve around 2 or 3 people or 2 or 3 parties, and they always have their hardcore supporters, sometimes even manufactured. That was what happened with Najib. So don't be disheartened, because I can tell you that whatever you feel is being communicated and how arrogant some sections of UMNO or PAS or Bersatu can be when it comes to corruption, when it comes to mismanagement, they are a minority. And those people are not reflective of the general Malaysian, especially even Malay population as a whole. And that's exactly why we are in today here in this afternoon. Eventually, I think we have to admit one thing, that society progressed from one general election to another, although politicians don't want to accept it. What I see in this country, usually society progresses with leaps and bounds much faster than what the politicians are ready to change with that progress. What happens is the demand for political parties have gone up so much from 2018 until now. It is no longer enough to tell that UMNO, NBN, NPN, and PAS are corrupt. It doesn't cut anymore with the Malays. That one I can tell. As far as Malays, general Malay population is concerned, don't tell me something that I don't know. I know UMNO is corrupt. I know that PAS takes advantage of religion just for power. We all know that. After all, they live with us in our society. What they want to know is that if we were to elect you PH, how are you going to be different? And that's sometimes why some quarters in PH don't like me. Because we have to constantly look in the mirror. It borders arrogance. If we tell people that we are better because we are less corrupt. Public expects nobody to be corrupt. So, so-called anti-corruption credentials cuts little as much as, voters' preference is concerned with the public nowadays. So that is something that, as I say, politicians have to shift and progress much as fast as the public, because the voters demand us to do that. The voters actually want politicians to address and tell what exactly the idea. That's number one. Even that is not enough, because public understands enough that some people can prepare a very good working paper, proposal, consulting brief to politicians, and they just go and regurgitate to the public. The public demands that you have the credibility that you will be able to implement. So they want to see the track record. They want to see that you walk the talk. And I can tell that I think in the last 4 or 5 years, perhaps that is one area that we didn't do enough with the Malay voters by and large. It's, of course, when there's not enough contestation and formulation and discourse from PH in terms of how exactly we want to address the problems, the solutions that are important to the Malays. Of course, it's very easy for UMNO and PAS to continuously play the race, religion, and identity sentiment, because that's the only thing that they know, and they know enough. Emotion delivers votes. that is something that I hope we are able to do better this time around, to articulate. And I'm asking, those who are with us, who want to see reform and progress, understand enough that we have to attend to everyone's basically 2 or 3 important issues that they want to hear. So it's no longer, in my opinion, it's no longer about corruption. Winning is no longer just about promising that we are better. To be fair to the public as well, we've had cases of PH politicians being dragged to court. Sometimes we have had some questionable transactions, dealings, decisions. After 15 years, it's bound to happen. And sometimes we forget that the public has been watching us for 15 years. This is not 2008. This is 2022. A lot has changed. And, we can't go with that innocent look and say, we haven't done anything bad. And so the tone has to change, the approach has to change. And that's part of the reason why I want to do this, because it's important to convey to the voters out there who are watching, basically, that we can come down from our high horse, that we understand enough that being incorruptible is a requirement. It's no longer an advantage that can sell you off. Anyone who wants to assume public office, you are expected to be incorruptible. I mean, that's a requirement. But what endears you, what wins votes, is your ability to get Malaysia of all races, of all requirements, of all needs and wants out of the current doldrums. So I think if we do that, actually, the votes from the Malays especially will translate very easily. It's just that we perhaps didn't do enough in the past, and we need to start doing this now. And I, as you, remain hopeful. Well, if you're in my shoes, you have no choice. You have to remain hopeful. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. But I also, travel far and wide, meet different people. Different people have different sophistication, views, and focus. But there's an inherent goodness in the common people. What we see that dominates the narrative so far is a very minority elite groups, and they don't represent you and I. The common people are represented by simple requests. You actually want a fair environment where everyone can thrive if you work hard. By nature, as human beings, we know that those with talents, with the right attitude, who work hard, these people will succeed. And when they succeed, society will succeed. Normal people, be it Malay, Chinese, Indians, want to see good job creations that is worth, our investment for education, that has some semblance of progress in the future, that can afford a better life for everyone. These are the kind of things that we have to focus further so that we move away from the politics of religion, race, identities, and the public is more than ready for it. I suppose PKR, DAP, Amanah just have to step up to that and balance between, some of the narratives that focus on UMNO's and BN's mismanagement, the toxic politics that they bring, and focus enough time as well to bring about the positive perspective of this country, that we are not going to reach a point of no return, that, there's a lot of hope, that everyone actually subscribe to the same Malaysian values when it comes to working hard, when it comes to tolerance, when it comes to being ahead of others. And I think if we do that enough, I can't tell this general election. That's why I always say that I think G16 the pendulum swing will happen in such a way that is going to be a big mandate to the progressive parties. Hopefully, PH remain a progressive parties by G16, but we are going through a transitional generational change where everything that we know of the legacy of the system that we've had for the last 50 years, it will climax in G16, and a group of progressive parties will be voted in with a huge mandate. My biggest concern is not so much whether we can defeat BN or UMNO or PAS. My biggest concern is that when that happens, with a big mandate, we better do it right. And within 5 years, we should be able to reconfigure as much as possible to put us back on the right track. So my focus is also to advocate that, we have to change as politicians. We have to change the way we think of ourselves. Stop thinking that, this holier than thou, high horse, that we are good and so on. I fear more that when we do get the big mandate in 5-6 years' time from now, we let the public down. Because that chance is the best chance for us to reconfigure as many things as possible. So, focus on the good thing. Know that everyone feels the same. Because if you don't hate corruption after what we know about 1MDB, now about LCS, there's more coming, you're not normal. Something is wrong with you mentally if you can accept this. And while there are some mental people in UMNO, the rest of Malays are not mental. They actually understand that this is bad. But we just have to do a bit more selling. And we cannot take anyone's vote for granted just because we feel that we are better, we are holier. And that's, I think, hopefully some adjustments that we can do in the next few months. Okay, next question. Yeah, so I have to start addressing this part of the...
I'm Adam from Singapore. My question is, you see that Malaysian ringgit has lagged against US dollar at a staggering 4.6 this week. And some economic reporters even say that it might break 5 to 1 US dollar by the end of this year. This will lead to more expensive imports of raw materials and goods to our country and cause inflation impact on our country. So I just want to ask your opinion. You were in the government. What can it?
I'm not.
What if you're in the government? What can it be done to address this economy issue? And second question is, I remember that earlier this year, sort of March or April, you once say that we might not become a government in the next coming election. Instead, we should focusing on become the strongest opposition. So, I just want to know what makes you think like that we should focus on the next PADU 16? Thank you.
Let me address the what if you are in government question first, Thank God we are not in government now. We are at a perfect storm, and everyone knows that, basically. UMNO is trying to tell the public as if that PH and PKR are not aware that we are in a perfect storm. We are aware. And in fact, if anything, that scares me more than anything else, because we are in a perfect storm where, so-called economic moves by some countries, in this case by the US, caused havoc all over the world. And it coincided with a post-COVID, where there was a huge pump priming for over 2 years that delays recession even further. And obviously, when you pump prime, basically you print money and just circulate more credits into the economy to keep everything afloat. obviously it leads to some form of inflationary pressure that has been going on for 2 years. To make matters worse, and then you have the war in Ukraine, and the war then exacerbated even further, not just energy prices, but also global supply chain disruption, because post-COVID, we already have this problem because a lot of goods come from China and the shipping lines. When you have war, then the bunker price shooting up through the roof. You know, all this come at the same time. And to make matters, while human beings can try to formulate different responses to inflation, to supply chain, even war, we certainly cannot fight Mother Nature. And everywhere in the world, still bracing for themselves for perhaps the worst, natural disasters happening all over the place. I was watching about what's happening, the typhoon in Florida, in southern eastern seaboard of the US, Florida to South Carolina to North Carolina. They've had typhoon all their lives. It's normal. Tornadoes and typhoon in the US. But this one that they are having now, according to meteorological report, this is a once in a 500 years event. Nothing in the last 500 years was at this strength. So the perfect storm is all known. So of course, every country has to ride through this perfect storm, especially in relation to US trying to rein in their inflation and an increased interest rate, because logical, if you are US, you would have done the same thing. What I question and what I think we would have done differently is this. We understand enough that our currency value, ringgit, is very much affected by the FPIs, foreign policy investments, foreign portfolios investments, money coming in, buying our stocks at Bursa, the bonds, basically the financial instruments, the portfolios. These are the transactions that happen every day. And it's the inflows and outflows of this that has more immediate impact on our currency compared to, for example, the conventional trade balance, import and export, because the frequency of transaction for import and export is less compared to FPIs, which happens every day, And that, to me, is where a lot of things could have been done better. If you recall, in the last 1-2 years, right? If you are an investor, what would you think about Malaysian, market as a whole? The most memorable sequence of events in our Bursa in the last 12-24 months was super dynamic. So you have one company being propped up by public money, and then eventually, auditors raised a red flag. There were allegations of fraud, of invoices, basically bogus invoices and so on. The value plummeted, and then it went to the court and so on and so forth. Charges were brought against, and this is a key public counter in this country. Charges were brought, and then eventually they were let off with just fine. And the regulators actually had to resign. The top 3 regulators at Securities Commission basically left. If you are an investor, how would you think? Put yourself in the shoes of Malaysian investors investing in, say, Samoa Island. And you have in Samoa stock market, you have all this state back and so on. And I put my money there, and all I saw is this. A few other things that we've heard so far, Sapura, for example, bail out excessive bleeding of public money. So if you are an investor, obviously Malaysia doesn't rank well when it comes to governance, when it comes to protecting minority interests, when making sure that, you know, we take people's money, investors' money, and we do our best responsibly to create value and to protect their value. You can't blame them. And these people control billions of ringgit. And at the same time, you know, we also have structural economic issues. Everyone knows that we are stuck at the middle income trap. We can't, you know, cross. And then we are losing out in terms of FDIs with Singapore, with Indonesia, in terms of growth and GDP size-wise. As a nation of 30 million plus, we are already quite small population-wise, but over the years, our GDP kept dropping from the top 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. At the same time, when a much larger market like Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam are picking up. If you are an investor, what would you say? It's a bad country. And the moment US basically changed its monetary policy, and we know how aggressive they'll be, I think, you know, they will continue to increase interest rate. Obviously, investors will say like, look, I'm better off putting my investments in a safe haven like US Treasury notes, you know, in US banks, because I now get more or less the same return, but the risk of putting my money in this country, which have changed four prime ministers, right? About to change 4 prime ministers after this. And that's why they keep moving out. They keep moving the money out. So, of course, there are structural issues. You know, I've said before that the structural economic issues is real. The fact that we don't seem to be able to cross the so-called middle income trap. We still are stuck with consumers of technology. We don't create our own technology. And that stops us from being able to go to other markets and provide value-added services to other markets so that we take over the services, the high-value services that the Europeans, the Japanese, the Koreans used to provide for us. That's given. That's structural, and it will take some time. But at the very least, if there is a semblance of working and credible regulation that, you know, we take governance seriously in our stock, in our market, at least I think we build a bit more confidence in this country. And that's the second thing that I think we can do better than BN or PN. It's a question of confidence. You know, I run a startup. I don't know how many of you know startup. Startup works like this. You know, you have an idea, you want to solve some pain points in whatever. In our case, we focus on marketing tech, we focus on HR tech. You know, we think that we can do better through technology. It's an idea. The most that we have is a proof of concept. I go to investor and say, look, this is what I'm going to do. This is the technology. These are the people I have, the skills. These are my business plan. This is how we're going to grow. I want 5 million from you. And that 5 million, if you invest 5 million, you get 10% shares in my company. Imagine if I do that and Ahmad Maslan or Najib comes and say the same thing to the investor and say that, you know, I have this idea, blah, 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 blah. I want 5 million from you. I come with my band of engineers, young people, top fresh grads. Najib comes with Rusma. You know straight away, most probably, the investor will invest their 5 million in my startup and they will run away from Najib and Rusma. Economy is like that. It's about confidence. And confidence is a function of good leadership with clarity about what we want to do. It's a function of the skills that we bring together. It's a function of the capacity to deliver. If we say that within 5 months, this will happen, I'm going to focus my attention as a government to deliver this, it happens after 5 months. And then investors will feel that, actually, yeah, I think they will be able to deliver. That's obviously has gone missing. We couldn't even manage harga ayam. So if you are an investor, no matter what you say, no matter how many companies go to Bursa and say, I'm going to do this, I get this business, investor will shun away. And the biggest fault that I think this government has done, regardless of whatever they want power and so on, give some semblance of economic leadership, some semblance of competence, that you know the macro, you know the micro, but you also know how the market works and how to bring in the government support to allow the economy to grow. You haven't seen that. Not at all. Hardly anything at all. For the last 3-4 years, we've never heard anything apart from now it's even funny because Muhyiddin, as the chair of the National Recovery Council, said, "Oh, Ismail Sabri, you have failed the economy." It's like, in this instance, I actually take side with Ismail Sabri, because Ismail Sabri, hang on, you are part of government, you are in my government. So if you say that I fail, you also fail. So all of them have failed. The failure to provide economic leadership when it comes to a pathway to growth, to value creation, to resolving the key structural economic problems that we have, you cannot fault the investors to run away. That's the reason, Jokowi could talk to Elon Musk, because at least suddenly investors, all the biggest tech companies in the world, they look at Indonesia, they understand one thing. This is a sleeping giant. They have about 300 million population. It's a huge market. And they are the biggest market in a region with about 600 million population. This whole Southeast Asia is about 600 million. It's a bigger market than the North America. Canada, US is actually smaller market-wise than this region. This region also has one of the highest digital growth in the world. Of course, not necessarily being driven by Malaysia, but it's driven by Singapore, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand. So obviously, if I'm Elon Musk, I say, hang on, they've been very liberal in terms of developing their talents. They've been, the bureaucracy of opening up a company in Indonesia, especially a tech company, is so much faster, 24 hours. I know because I've done it. It only took 24 hours to register a tech company that can start operating in Indonesia. Try to do it here in Malaysia. So obviously, Elon Musk, all the tech giants will be interested to know. And that's how they attract investments and they attract relocation from other countries to Indonesia. We tried to do the same thing, but we sent Azmin Ali. You remember? We sent Azmin Ali to go to SpaceX. Unfortunately, he didn't get to meet Elon Musk. The most that he could do, most probably on taxpayers' money, is to take selfie in front of SpaceX building. So you can tell, how it's all a matter of confidence. And I think we can do better. If we change government and PH takes over, I think we will be able to impress investors better. And that's usually the starting point. Investors understand that it takes a lot of efforts, it's complicated to develop and to deliver, but it must begin with the leadership, the clarity of objective, and the pathway to deliver that value. And I think we can do that much, much better than the current crop of ministers you have. And finally, when it comes to economy, certain things you can do for the short term, certain things you can do for the midterm, certain things you will take longer to resolve. The issue of economic content will take quite a long time because it's very much intertwined with the cultural issue, with the education system, with the way that we bring up our children to look at risk, to look at passion, to look at creativity, to look at the thinking cap. These are cultural issues, It's not necessarily a syllabus issue. You can get people who come back from Harvard or MIT, but if they are not conditioned to take risks, to be creative, to want to know and want to fail and relearn again, there's a limit to what MIT and Harvard graduates can do compared to someone who may not have as privileged an education, but has the right mental attitude towards it. So I always see education system is not just a question of pedagogy or syllabus. It is a question of value that you inculcate in your children from the very beginning. If you train them to be a bit more inquisitive, a bit more value-oriented, that they understand that if my parents give me 10 ringgit, what can I do with my 10 ringgit? Those are very much a cultural issue. So it will take some time. So that's given. We have to really reorientate our education system from kindergarten to primary school to university. We cannot continue to produce graduates or students who do not have the risk appetite for failing and for relearning and for taking risks. It's quite simple, That will take some time. But there are certain things that we can do for midterm. Our GLCs, for example, I'm known to be quite critical of the way we configure our GLCs in this country. Not so much because of race, not so much because Malay versus non-Malay and so on. Number one, I think they crowd the already crowded scene. Because they tend to be in the same sector that the private sector is. Property, for example. If there is a business, government has some contracts in oil and gas. Semua masuk oil and gas. Suddenly you hear UMW, Toyota pun buat tu semua GLC semua, suddenly everyone rush to oil and gas and so on. The problem when it comes to investors' view of this country, in my view, is this. We lack sexy companies. If you look at the kind of business that we have, the kind of operation, the kind of activities, the kind of nature of business is very much traditional, unscalable business. Even if you do so well, most probably you will be confined to the Malaysian market. You will be a local champion, but you struggle to expand beyond our shores and to scale up to new markets altogether. So by nature, the world of investments and investors look for those companies that has a good product, a good idea, and most importantly, has the big potential for massive scalability. That once you are successful in your little market, you can replicate it very quickly without too much capital, without too much physical barriers that you have to spend a lot of money to set up physical operation. That's why usually those countries with enough companies that has these potentials usually attract attention from investors. You look at Estonia. And that's why Estonia suddenly becomes like the darling of the investors in the world. They are a small country, but the government understood enough that they can never compete with the brick and mortar scene like anyone else. So the government consciously digitalize everything, including making sure that the government itself is digital. Everything is digital. So they are forced to create innovations on digital products, digital solutions. In the process, they produce so many software engineers, so many tech talents that eventually, the investments from US, from China, from over goes to that little country by the name of Estonia. Nowadays, if you do go to the product, you don't be surprised that some of it is actually from Estonia. Now, I'm not saying that we have to do exactly what Estonia does, but that's the role of a government. If you understand that we rely heavily on FPI and investments to create value, we must consciously, as a government, create the environment, incentive, communicate very clearly that we must move away from the crowding of the traditional industry and start focusing on some of new companies, new industry that has a big potential for scalability. That's how we make Malaysians stand tall and be proud. Because you create a Malaysian product that is so successful here, and within 10 years, you have these products all over the world because, what works here can also work others. And then if it's a good product here, if we can push it, it will be good products elsewhere. So these are 2-3 things. And among the corporations that you have here, most probably, I always wonder, GLC with all its resources can't do this. Why is it so difficult to create one Malaysian product that can be scaled up so quickly? I know it is difficult because I'm doing it. But you can't compare with me because I have to raise my money and then, with shoestring budget, we bootstrap everything. But I always wonder what's so difficult to bring the best Malaysian brains to focus on this and to scale up. So those are the kind of things that governments could and should have done. Of course, the finishing line has to be crossed by corporations, by talents themselves. But government must be able to provide the direction for it. And when there is enough direction for it, you will have enough talents from all over the world, Malaysians coming back and focusing, and that will light up our thinking bulb, and that it will attract investors coming. And then every time there are policy changes in US, in Europe, in China, even though we will be affected, but at least we won't be hammered the way that we are hammered now. How long do you guys want to stay? Nanti jap. I think we are supposed to habis pukul berapa? Pukul 5. So we have about 1 hour. Okay. I can hear? Oh, abang nak pakai mic so that orang kat luar boleh dengar juga.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Salam.
Saudara Rafizi Ramli yang saya anggap sebagai pemimpin yang mewakili generasi baru dan generasi muda. Saya ingin tanya satu soalan, sebab banyak persoalan yang saudara kemukakan itu tidak dapat ditangkap oleh minda saya.
Yes.
Kerana ia berlega di sekitar bisnes dan juga bagaimana kita nak menghadapi senario ekonomi dunia yang gawat ketika ini. Jadi saya nak kongsi dengan saudara satu persoalan yang mendasar. Sebab yang akan memilih saudara bukan hanya orang berniaga, tetapi juga adalah rakyat jelata. Jadi saya melihat sejak Pakatan Rakyat dapat menumbangkan kerajaan Barisan Nasional pada tahun 2008. Jadi hari ini 2022, 14 tahun. Jadi kita harus membuat penilaian yang adil. Adakah Pakatan Rakyat ataupun Pakatan Harapan itu memenuhi kehendak dan harapan rakyat yang paling asasi? Apa yang saya lihat, penilaian saya mungkin tak betul. Saya melihat ada beza banyak di antara kerajaan yang sedia ada yang dipimpin oleh DAP dan PKR dengan kerajaan UMNO Barisan Nasional yang lepas. Kerana kedua-duanya mengutamakan bisnes pelaburan asing yang mengharapkan pelaburan asing yang terlampau, tetapi telah mengenepikan hak-hak rakyat yang paling asas. Saya beri satu contoh. Di Pulau Pinang hanya ada satu saja kawasan nelayan pantai yang masih aktif, subur dan kaya dengan hasil-hasil laut. Itu pun hendak dikorbankan untuk membina 3 buah pulau buatan. Jadi timbul persoalan, di mana keutamaan kerajaan? Adakah sanggup kita membuat satu pantai, satu laut yang baru dengan menggunakan teknologi kita? Yang sedia ada, yang dikurniakan oleh Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala, kenapa kita nak korbankan? Kalau sekiranya 3 pulau itu, 1 pulau diberi kepada rakyat, saya mungkin boleh bertolak ansur. Tetapi ketiga-tiganya hendak dibuka kepada pelaburan asing dan yang akan menghuni di situ bukan rakyat tempatan. Apa faedah yang rakyat boleh dapat? Kemudian sepanjang jajaran pantai, seluruh Pulau Pinang, saya bagi satu contoh dari Tanjung Tok Kong, Tanjung Bunga, Batu Peringgi dan Teluk Bahang akan ditebus guna tanpa ada satu bahagian rakyat. Jadi bagaimana kami nak memilih? Kami nak pilih Barisan Nasional ke? Atau kami nak memilih kerajaan yang sedia ada? Nampaknya kerajaan yang sedia ada pada saya lebih zalim daripada kerajaan Barisan Nasional. Kerana mereka tidak terkesan langsung kepada penderitaan rakyat. Jadi peluang kami untuk memiliki rumah pun sangat terhad. Kerana segala-galanya dibuka untuk pelaburan asing. Jadi kita nak berubah daripada ekonomi yang terlalu mengutamakan golongan atasan. Ekonomi korporat kepada ekonomi yang lebih merakyat. Adakah ini boleh berlaku dan perubahan ini boleh berlaku? Sebab kebanyakan wakil-wakil yang dipilih sebagai adun. Mereka kita boleh persoalkan adakah mereka mewakili rakyat atau mereka mewakili korporat, golongan peniaga ataupun mereka mewakili diri mereka sendiri. Jadi apa beza, apa pilihan yang kita ada? Kita nak berubah. Tetapi mentaliti ahli politik sama ada yang sedia ada ni, Barisan Nasional ataupun yang akan mengganti itu tidak jauh bezanya. Jadi kita hari ini ingin memilih wakil rakyat, kita tak kira siapa dia, UMNO ke, PAS ke, siapa saja. Tetapi kalau dia boleh buktikan dia benar-benar wakil rakyat dan sanggup berdiri untuk kepentingan rakyat, itulah pilihan kita.
Saya sebenarnya tadi masa sidang media tadi pun itu soalan
Tuan
pertama
Rafizi,
yang ditanya.
Can I interrupt?
Ya, ya.
Yeah. I just want to add to what our honourable person here has said. It is very true as regards to the nelayan. And this Penang South Island reclamation also has other issues which are very been brought up by the environmental NGOs. Issues like the rising sea level and the climate change. So all these issues plus other groups that are affected, I am scared that this will be translated into the loss of votes by PH in the coming election. So we need Tuan Rafizi to give us your viewpoint of the risk and the possibility of this particular project affecting the livelihood of the people in Penang, or will it be a positive contribution? We need you to have your viewpoint on this matter. Thank you.
Ini soalan yang ditanya dalam sidang media tadi lah, dan saya faham kalau di Pulau Pinang ia isu yang besar, kan. Saya selalunya tidak begitu mengikuti dengan dekat kalau yang berlaku di bawah. So saya selalunya tumpu pada isu nasional. Although I am aware Dan saya juga tahu bahawa dalam PKR isu ini sering dibangkitkan kerana pandangan wakil rakyat PKR agak berbeza mengenai reclamation ini. Now, before we go into the details apa cerita semua kan, ada dua perkara yang saya nak sebut kan. Yang abang sebut tadi tu sebenarnya tepat mengenai untuk membayangkan sentimen rakyat terutamanya pengundi Melayu sekarang. To those who are non-Malays here and watching, that's basically what the Malays think now. So it's not really about supporting UMNO because they support corruption. The sense of feeling is that if PH is not careful, basically voters feel that it's one of the same. And that's exactly what we saw happen in Malacca and Johor. Basically, majority of Malay voters in Johor rejected corruption. Basically, majority knows things are bad. Majority disapprove of federal government and UMNO. But they feel that, I don't know whether it will make that much difference anyway if I were to vote for Pakatan. That is actually a real issue. And if anything, that's one anecdote that is happening in your midst in Pulau Pinang. Because dulu, sebelum 2008, susah untuk pengundi nak bezakan antara satu parti dengan satu parti. Sekarang kita dah ada track record yang panjang di Pulau Pinang, di Selangor kan, dan juga di Negeri Sembilan. Jadi isu-isu yang selalunya jadi masalah kepada kerajaan Pakatan Harapan ini ialah balancing between development and also societal impact and environmental impact. It's usually issue of SDG, ESG, environment, sustainability, governance. Ini isu-isu yang di mata rakyat kalau kita tidak berhati-hati dilihat sebagai lebih kurang sama. Okay. Ni pandangan saya, and I know some people will not be happy at all, but I usually say what I feel is my view. The challenge, and this also relates to what we've been talking so far dengan soal economic policies, soal direction, soal higher value content. Apabila sesebuah parti menjadi kerajaan, if we are not careful, it's very easy to fall exactly into the same mold. Kerana di negara kita ini, the one of the key engine or drivers of economic growth is property development, realty, kan? Dan di tempat macam Pulau Pinang lagi lah, we run out of space very quickly. So there's a tendency to always go for reclamation. Bukan saja di Penang, you saw the same thing in Malacca and so on. If we are not careful, we may hit the so-called growth line. We may hit the income that we need for the state. But we have to ask how much damage, how much it costs, or in the long run, especially in terms of climate change, in terms of environment, is it something that we can reliably guess what will be the cost 10, 15, 20 years? So I think you know where I stand in all this. If I'm in the shoes, most probably I'll be very apprehensive in soal reclamation, soal semua, because it's not just about, kalau pun contohnya abang tak datang hari ni dan bawa isu ni, my view is that the country must move away from the preoccupation about property sector, realty and so on, because it's it doesn't push us into the high value chain. I prefer to focus on, it's more difficult, memang lagi susah, but I prefer to focus on more higher content, technology content kan. So, but that's my view. Obviously, people will say you are not in the shoes of a governing government. It's easy for you to become someone like you because you don't have a responsibility to govern. And so I suppose in the shoes of government, then that also, ensnares some of our kerajaan juga. Ialah how do you balance between this push because investments coming in, property going up is considered as progress. I think in PKR lah, in PKR, I think we've been consistent. Is something that has been brought in internally, and then I think will be continued to be brought up. I cannot tell for certain, you asked tadi, how is this going to impact voters? Cuma, the way I look at it is that even if it's not a question of votes, it's a question of livelihood. Because saya pun ada satu isu yang sama yang saya akan mula bersuara insyaAllah minggu depan, ialah mengenai MRT 3 di Kuala Lumpur. Dan MRT 3 tu akan masuk ke kawasan saya, Pandan, dan beratus-ratus buah rumah yang dah duduk dekat situ 30 tahun, semua kena halau. Of course dia kata, is a compulsory acquisition, kerajaan akan ambil dan bayar and so on. But they've lived there for generations. They are, upper working class, some middle class, some working class. Itu kampung dia, taman perumahan lah dalam bandar kan, but itu kampung dia. You are, and after 30-40 years, when you relocate them, you ambil tanah dia, kemudian you send them God knows where, hujung Sepang, it's uprooting someone's livelihood for the sake of questionable infrastructure. Contohnya, macam MRT 1 dan MRT 2 pun kapasiti tak sampai 50% lagi. Ridership baru 40%, and then kita nak commit pula 50 billion untuk buat tu. So I can relate to that sebenarnya, because it's not so much, to me, it's not even issue about menang kalah votes ke apa. If I were in the shoes of those people affected, I would have felt the same way. So my difficulty is this, I am not, I don't have the locus standi per se. Obviously juga pimpinan yang lain akan kata you kena jaga mulut sikit sebab nanti akan dijadikan bahan oleh UMNO or MCA untuk serang kita di Penang. So I'm fully aware of that. But I think principally something as big as that definitely affects the livelihood of many others. And then we have to really be careful to balance between what exactly is the economic value that we want versus the effect on the livelihood of others. And that's my view. And, obviously, perkara ini akan dibawa ke dalam mesyuarat PH kerana bila saya bersuara, dia akan dilaporkan oleh media, and then dia akan jadi isu besar, and then MCA, gerakan semua akan join in and maki kan. So definitely, our component parties will ask that you go to Penang and wreak havoc. But that's my view. Actually, that's my view. Economically, I think we have to move away from brick and mortar type of development. There's no end to building buildings. There will always be buildings, and then there will always be hot money coming in. But what's the point of hot money coming in if the locals cannot afford it? That's my view. And I've seen it in other countries like Cambodia. The whole of township in Cambodia called Sihanoukville is very fancy and so on, but it's a ghost town because it was Chinese money coming in, building Sihanoukville, but local Cambodians cannot afford it. In the end, it becomes sarang organized crime for Chinese gangsters. And then, yang orang kita yang kena kidnap semua pergi kerja scam dekat Indonesia, dekat Cambodia, they are all in Sihanoukville. So that's how Sihanoukville is. So It's a very tough moral question. If you are a government, I want to see more development. I want to show to people that I've done my job. It's good. But I think there comes a point that we have to take that very conscientious decision that we need to focus on the long term and move away from property investments, especially if it affects the livelihood of so many people. Reporters are here, they will report it, it will go out. And I see what people say after this, But I also hope you understand. Sometimes sama di Penang, sama di Selangor. Kan ada orang marah dan sebagainya, kata ni soal kuari lah, soal tu, kenapa kamu tak lawan and so on. As opposed to, I think UMNO politicians, you will hear me speaking up in public like this. Maksudnya kalau saya ada reservation dan saya tak setuju, I will say I don't agree with it. I know that as a Menteri Besar, as a Chief Minister, you have your set of work cut out for you. You see it from different perspective. But I also hope they understand the perspective of common citizens like you and I, who maybe kita tidak ada that constraint and have to deliver something. But at the very least, I think principally what the public expects is that we move away from unbridled property projects, especially if it affects the livelihood of so many other people. Winning or losing votes, I think, is a different thing altogether. But if I were to put myself in the shoes of those people affected, I will feel extremely crossed. Because, it means a lot to me. It's my livelihood, it's what I have known. And if there are ways to get around it, I'm sure people would want to see politicians do their best to do a bit more than just saying it is what it is. So we'll see how it goes when it gets reported. Lepas ni saya mungkin tak boleh pakai auditorium ini lah. Any other questions? Yeah. Tadi ada satu soalan tadi yang saya tak jawab pasal opposition tadi. But
Assalamualaikum.
Assalamualaikum.
Saya Mak Pahlawi. Saya nak tanyakan, banyak telah diperkatakan oleh hadirin sekalian mengenai sektor ekonomi and all that. Cuma persoalan saya, semalam Saudara Rafizi dah menyatakan satu kenyataan dan pernyataan bahawa calon-calon yang akan dipilih untuk PR15 adalah mempunyai karakter-karakter yang tertentu. Jadi persoalan saya, apakah keyakinan dalam soal pemilihan kandidat-kandidat calon-calon tidak akan mengkhianati seperti mana yang telah berlaku. Jadi pandangan Saudara Rafizi sendiri. Terima kasih.
Soalan ni mudah sikit lah, saya boleh jawab terus. Certain things have changed. Certain things have changed. Satu, anti-hopping law, which I hope is gazetted before election. Kan? Anti-hopping law means kalau dia lompat parti, dia hilang kursi dia. Jadi dia akan fikir dua kali lah, because dia tak guna lah. I mean, there's no value for them anymore untuk dia lompat. Kerana they will lose the... Kan? So I think that will take care of a lot of the risk. Dekat PKR sendiri pun, we will continue to sign a bond that we have 10 million bond. The court case dengan Zuraida is ongoing now. And is a contractual arrangement di antara parti dengan calon, kerana parti membenarkan calon menggunakan kempen parti, logo parti. It's almost that you are using our brand and you are using our platform, because on your own you would not have gotten that votes anyway. You got the vote because of the facility and assets that are given by the party. So akan ada two tier kan. Satu anti-hopping law, but at the party level pun kita akan pastikan semua sign kali ini, termasuklah Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim sendiri, dia pun kena sign juga kan. So I think that resolve it lah. Cuma masalah yang saya lagi bimbang ialah seperti yang saya sebut tadi, pandangan dan harapan pengundi kepada kualiti wakil rakyat ni dah berbeza. Dulu 2008 orang kata letak, sebab tu kita ada banyak calon-calon dulu 2008 yang bertanding umur 26, tiba-tiba jadi wakil rakyat. They got shock of their lifetime. Kerana masa itu kita tak ada calon dan kita ramai orang tak yakin. Jadi kita bagi ruang pada sepenuhnya kan. Kita juga, saya pun faham bahawa contohnya kita ada ramai reformis yang dah lama, yang dalam PKR dah 20 tahun kan. Jadi dia rasa saya dah banyak berkorban dan semua, jadi saya dah jadi wakil rakyat 2 penggal, saya mesti jadi menteri sekarang contohnya kan. I don't think the public thinks that way. I think yang ini cabaran saya sebagai pengarah pilihan raya. Sebab saya rasa kita kena sediakan wakil rakyat dan pimpinan yang mewakili PKR ini yang mutu dan kecekapan dia, skill dia, kemahiran dia ialah dia betul-betul bila dapat jawatan tu tidak cukup dengan hanya jadi wakil rakyat, pergi tengok longkang, pergi tengok tu. Dia kena betul-betul ada kemahiran tertentu. Kerana kita ada 4-5 tahun untuk kita ubah banyak perkara yang tak betul dalam sistem kerajaan. Satu pandangan di kalangan, contohnya di kalangan orang profesional ataupun daripada penjawat awam, civil servants kan. Kalau kita tidak berhati-hati dan wakil rakyat kita itu tidak sampai tahap untuk berkomunikasi dan berurusan dengan penjawat awam, sebab dia tidak pernah ada pengalaman yang lain, jadi penjawat awam akan pandang rendah kepada wakil rakyat. It's a common theme that when you are a leader, you have to bring something to the table to lead. Because leadership is earned. It's not given just because you are wakil rakyat. Don't expect people to really listen to you and do everything that you want. That was the UMNO days. Even kalau kita bekerja dalam syarikat swasta in an organisation, if you take someone young, very smart, and you put under someone very senior, one of the most common ways that that young smart person will leave is when he thinks that he cannot learn from the senior anymore because the senior just doesn't bring anything to the table. So if we elect a government, politician, wakil rakyat, and you expect wakil rakyat to lead and to give direction to the civil servants, you really have to know your staff. So that's my problem. Because dalam parti, I'm a minority for thinking that. Orang akan kata, engkau ni sombong sebab engkau rasa kau seorang je cerdik. Everyone says that about me. Well, I mean, tough luck. Bacalah banyak sikit lain kali kan. But I have a duty to make sure that we groom the next generation of wakil rakyat who's not enough, as I say tadi, tidak cukup that you are incorruptible. That's given. If you are corrupt, don't even think untuk jadi wakil rakyat. Your place is sebelah Najib dalam penjara. That's where you are. So it's given that you must be incorruptible. But we want to put in processes supaya we also have people who have competence, who can grasp issues, who are there, can contribute. If you are in the executive, whether at the state level ataupun parliamentary level dekat federal government, you can really have ideas about how to turn things around. Kalau tidak, you masuk, you pergi sign surat, you pergi rasmi program dia. That's the kind of things yang membuatkan orang hilang keyakinan kepada ahli politik. Then it's not so much about winning election. Bila orang hilang keyakinan kepada ahli politics, we cannot reform. Government after government datang, people just say it's same old. I'm not going to see any change. So the challenge this time around, and we have short time, is to really balance. And sebab itu, I will announce next week, most probably hari Khamis, we have approved it at PKR level, very detailed, basically screening process, and we want to open it to as many people as possible. Of course, different people, different leadership will have different weightage. Because kalau tidak, orang dalam parti kata macam tu, baik aku masuk muda. Kan? Buat apa dalam PKR? Anyone boleh jadi calon. But we want to make it bigger. So that we want to see more professionals coming, more civil servants, ex-civil servants, you know. And of course, we have to see, and we want to put in some data approach to it. We will test 2 or 3 potential candidates first on the ground, just to see what the voters think about them first before making a decision. So it's a process, and it's a tough process because nasib baik aku dah menang timbalan presiden. Kalau sekarang baru bertanding, confirm kalah ha. Kan? But dah menang, so it should be okay. But you know what? I mean, I don't know about other people, but we enter politics because we want to do something good, you know. When we were out of politics, I can speak for myself, you know, when I was out of politics, I always say, Ya Allah, why lah you do like this? Why lah like that? Why can't you do like this, you know? So I want to make sure that when I give my shot now at this tour of duty this time around, no matter how unpopular it is, I want to test it. It might work, it might not work, you know. Mungkin sebab kadang-kadang pun orang baru, kadang-kadang orang nampak ijazah cantik, pengalaman cantik, dia jadi wakil rakyat, dia sombong nak mampus, nak keluar rumah, pun problem juga, you know. So I understand there are so many so-called variables to what makes a good wakil rakyat, a good leader, kan. But I do want to so-called stretch the parameters a bit. Because doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same result is insanity, you know kan. Jadi kita tak nak lagi calon-calon ini keputusannya hanya 2-3 orang. We'll try to be as objective as possible, especially now sebab kita tahu anti-hopping law and the personal bond hopefully will address issue of lompat parti. Then the party must move one step further. How do we get the best pool of candidates and cultivate them? Because we must be ready to govern, not just to shoe in and continue to do the same thing. We must be able to govern and see things radically and make a departure about everything that we think is wrong about this country. And it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of skill and it takes a lot of conviction. Lagi banyak wakil rakyat and pimpinan who fit the criteria, who can bring it forward, and I think we have a much better chance of success, you know, to address things. Yeah. Do you want to take the mic? No, you just can go to the mic and I guess.
Okay, Assalamualaikum, selamat petang, Raf and the rest. Saya Dr. Suraya Sudin, saya daripada Perlis, all the way with my husband, Dr. Ghazali. Actually, I tak ada apa nak tanya lah dekat you sebab tadi bila dah dengar semua tu, ada memang banyak nak tanya. You ni one of the, Rafizi ni one of the kita punya macam apa idola lah. Kita suka sangat. I selalu mengikuti you punya perkembangan. Saya di PKR tahun 2008. 2010 saya bertanding Ketua Wanita Malaysia melawan Zuraidah Kamarudin dan kalah lah kan. Jadi kalah tu bawa dirilah, tak tinggalkan PKR. Saya tetap teguh bersama PKR walaupun cuma tak nak jawatan, macam Raf juga tetap teguh dan tak lompat-lompat parti walaupun ada yang kata Dr. Suraya dah berhenti, dah pergi mana-mana. Tak, kita tetap bersama PKR dan Alhamdulillah selepas daripada Rafizi menang kali kedua ni bertanding timbalan presiden, sayalah dan kawan-kawan sangat berbangga sebab kita memang sokong sangat perubahan di dalam PKR dan selepas dengar duduk kat situ sejam pun kebas dah punggung saya.
Saya degree ni.
Selepas dengar almost 1 hour dan dan mungkin the rest of you all lah ya, in front of us ni memang seorang anak muda, ya.
I'm actually not young, you know.
No, you look very young.
I'm crossing
And then-
50 in about 4 years' time.
And then, okay, and then you are intelligent, and for me, for us, you are the asset for negara, and we doa you as a future Prime Minister, for Malaysia. Okay.
You know, selalunya who people say will become Prime Minister is cursed.
No. Doa tu, doa. Jadi, apa? Cuma kita before that, my friend yang sokong you, support you for the election baru ni, kita tak ada jawatan tapi kita support you, ya. Jadi dan dia orang cakap sekian salam dengan you, tapi it's very katanya Rafizi ni work very very hard. Gajah pun boleh tumbang, kan? Jadi it's true lah, it's for the negara, kan? And election is very near. Jadi cuma saya nak bertanya kepada Raf lah, kalau macam kita ni ada PKR, kita ni tak boleh lah nak banding dengan parti muda. Kalau nak bertanding, baik masuk parti muda, kita boleh menang, kan? Boleh tak, sekarang ni rakyat bertumpu kepada PKR yang parti yang stable, kan? Dah macam UMNO, I was in UMNO 22 years, kan? Jadi adakah kita ni bila kita dah menang, kita dulu sebelum ni kita ambil siapa saja, macam kata umur 26 dah boleh jadi. Jadi sekarang ni ramai golongan muda di dalam PKR. Ada yang daripada orang-orang dulu-dulu lah letak orang-orang dia, kan. Jadi sekarang ni orang-orang ni rakyat tengok bila buat perubahan, ya. Of course lah, perubahan daripada PN kepada PH, kan, termasuklah kita PKR, kan. Jadi kita tengok yang perubahan ni ada yang bagus lah, memang ada yang bagus, tapi ada juga yang bila anak-anak muda ni dia bila perubahan diri dia yang berubah, tapi masyarakat setempat tak berubah, kan. Jadi ini adakah mereka ni kita nak buat macam style BN juga ke, bagi dia second chance 2 term, ataupun kita akan turun masuk ke grassroots dan monitor dia orang ni, dan bukan hanya berdasarkan laporan daripada parti. Yeah? Okay, thank you.
I want to say maybe the second question first, and then
Yes,
ada lagi.
I just want to ask regarding to Iswadi Muri. There is kena suspend. So might be how long it will be unsuspend will help the team in Sarawak to help them to more aggressive and leader as a leader in Sarawak.
Okay,
Thank you.
and hopefully last question.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've been following you very, very long time. I've seen one of the most brilliant in this generation. You are one. You are deserved to be here, and you are very smart, very smart. I've seen when you in work, I was there. 2018, I saw you, and the moment you won, I was I was very delighted, actually, very well. But thing came when I don't know whether you remember or not. There was a thing that they say that because of Dr. Mahathir, this PBH won. But you say, if not mistaken, you work, we worked very hard, we won it. But he didn't like that. From there was that he sidelined you. I don't know what this is. I can take a bet about it. And you, as a smart and very intelligent, you came up that you never go away. But you have done a lot of job at the inside. I followed that, and you have done your work from there. 16 itself, you have been studying everything in and out, and the system you have created is so smart. And you from there you can say this section will be voting you or not. You have done everything. I was so happy. But you know what? Like after autumn, there's a spring. And the 4 years but the moment after all this loss and all that, they came and request you, there was a cry for you, and when you came, this is a time, like a bloom, the flowers all bloom. And now we are very happy. I'm following very long this year, and very happy that you have come. But one thing, if there is, I'm very, very sure that PH will come. But that's a catch. How is the SPR is going to work? This is, I think you are very smart. You will be work upon that. This is a very important thing. If we don't come, because I remember 2008, YB Nurulza in Palembang Pantai, they caught the car carrying 10,000 votes. These are the things, that's why I don't know whether they are very happy, because they are the ruling party, they can do it. Another one, cash is king. I saw in the Johor, Malacca, I don't know whether they won because of any other thing. Money. The lady, the moment she got the money, she started talking so much, only the $50. I saw the thing, and Mahidin Yassin was giving $100, and then I saw the big table where Bosco was having billions of dollars, I think so, but he said no money to pay the this income tax and all that. That is what. Thank you very much. As everybody, I pray you to be. Pray for the God that you will be the become Prime Minister, and all races will be very happy with you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so I got three questions. Let me take some, address the so-called administrative PKR first before, perhaps I give response to our gentleman's speeches now. Iswadi, I was informed that because of the party election from, I think, March or earlier, March to July, the disciplinary board didn't go through, basically put a freeze on the hearing because everyone was focusing on the party election. Now that it's over, the new chairperson of the disciplinary board, the TERBUKA, Dr. Tan Yu Q, is going through one by one. So I think his case will come up. And I think we will go through the process. My view is this, sometimes I do sympathize with characters like him because there's a little bit of brashness that I have as a person. We say what we feel saying. Of course, his case was because he said certain things against the royalty. So because of that, he got suspended. Of course, there are manners and ways to say things. Sometimes it gets offensive, sometimes it doesn't. But I think as best as possible, we'll try not to shoot the messenger. So I have my views and the process will go through. And then we'll take it up from there. But I think as best as possible, we need everyone now. The time of the past where, we suspend here, this and that, I think. And before I won, many people in PKR, some quarters were very afraid because, I've been known to be no nonsense. You either do your stuff or you don't, I really don't like people to apple polish or say, your work will speak for yourself. So there were some people who were afraid that I will chop off everyone, because I'm known to be like that. You either shape up or you ship out, that kind of things. But we are about a few months from election and we need to gather everyone's strength. And as best as possible, I think, although the public and UMNO, they were waiting for me to shoot, for Anwar and myself to shoot at each other, and people will say that, PKL will crumble and so on. I think people forget how objective we can be. I can't change myself as a person. There are certain things that I do that annoy people and people feel, insecure with how I do things. That's given. That's just human beings. But I think when you take up a job, there are specifics of what you need to deliver. And more often than not, in order for you to deliver some of the objectives, you have to accommodate and work with as many people as possible. And so long as we understand the job requirement, then we should be able to navigate. And that's, I think, exactly how we will go through all these cases one by one. But the rule of thumb, I think, is quite simple. Principally, we should not shoot the messenger. We should tolerate dissent. We can guide people so that they are more professional in the way they do things, and as best as possible, we try to build from each other's strength. So, when the time comes, we'll cross the bridge. Dr. Suraya mentioned, basically that's the crux is quite simple lah. Every time kita nak masuk pilihan raya, then party leadership will have to decide, especially among existing wakil rakyat, have you done enough? Should we field another candidate and so on? So there will be various views. And of course, for each state seat or parliamentary seats, there'll be different stakeholders with different views. And that makes, it's very difficult for anyone in my shoes and Anwar's shoes to be able to come to a most sensible and I don't know about other politicians, and sometimes my criticism of politics is this: it lacks processes. It leaves everything too much to subjective judgment. It's either I like you or I don't like you, or I hear this guy, I hear that guy, and so on. So that's why if you're not careful, especially closer to election like this, without processes, then whoever who is the last who get the ear of the one who makes the decision, that's why people say that, okay, corruption, misjudgment happens because whoever who is my friends, I just listen to my friends, and then, that's how factionalism, that's how arguments happens in a party. What I want to do this time around is this. I want to make sure, as I said just now, the processes are in place for us to have as wide-ranging inputs from as many stakeholders as possible objectively. Of course, it will still be subjective decision eventually. But if you were to decide, if you are head of department and you were to decide whether someone gets promoted or not, and the promotion changes someone's livelihood, you don't want to do it just because I like him or I don't like him. You want to have a set of criteria, objectively a set of parameters to go through and compare like for like so that you reduce as much subjectivity as possible. This is what we are doing in PKR. This is what I will announce sometime next week, sometimes around Thursday. And I hope from there, we will get as many feedback, as many people coming forward. We will test on the ground first, scientifically, using data. We will actually poll people. It will cause us a bomb to poll, if, say, for example, one state C, we have like 3 or 4 leading candidates. After we screen everyone and we score everyone, these are the 4 leading candidates, including the incumbent. We will test. Logically, if the incumbent is good with his service so far, logically, when we test with the voters, he will come first. But if he's not, and the results shows that actually people don't like you, that's where, the party leadership, myself, Dr. Sri Anwar, has to go through and objectively decide whether we can field him or her again, if there are other candidates who are better and so on. Because at the end of the day, it's about 2 things. Number 1, winnability. Number 2 is about conscience. You want to make sure the candidate is going to be a good wakil rakyat. And I say this openly to people in PKR. Just because you are popular, just because you are good, you are great, you have many supporters, you have jawatan, we also want to see that bit about, do we think that conscience-wise are you just filling in the shoes, just want to become wakil rakyat, or you have a passion to do something and help everyone? It's very difficult because it's subjective, but it's something that I think we can bring to the table so that we are able to differentiate the kind of politics and candidates that we want to showcase to the public for them to choose, hopefully slightly more different than what I think the public think of politicians. Because I'm a politician now. I know it's not popular and I know people are cynical about politicians, but I hope, we can change the public's view that, politicians are all not that bad all the time, Some of us actually are quite okay, So, and it takes a lot of effort from the political parties. We actually have to do something about it, because imagine if you are in my shoes, you sign up for the worst job in the world. I mean, I had quite a good life. So I want to see that eventually we can convince enough Malaysians that, politicians are not that bad after all. But that can only begin if we prove ourselves as a party that we are trying our best to screen, to test, to gather data, to ask the stakeholders so that our process has a better chance of coming up with a good candidate for the public to elect. So hopefully I'll announce it this 1 week, and then we'll see from there. It might work, it might not work. They might move a motion of no confidence against me. I don't think so, but who knows, It will rock the boat a bit, what we are trying to do. But I think it's necessary going forward. So, last question, Uncle tanya tadi. I think the only advantage that I have standing here, because I don't see politics as a career or as something like I want to do. It's like, if you like something, you tend to overdo it, and it's usually quite bad. If you like sweet, if you have a sweet tooth, eventually you get diabetic. And the same, some people, if you are so much into something, you don't know where to draw boundaries. I've never liked politics, to be frank. It's not in my blood. I just want to be left alone doing my things. And I think that's, in a way, over the years, helped me a bit more than many other people who become politicians, because I spend most of my time actually doing other things. And that allowed me to understand, the nature of organization better. What does it take to move things, to listen better? I suppose I understand the mechanics of the world better, economically, business-wise, professionally, and so on. That's why my advice to most people who want to be politician is that, it's good to have the fire in the belly. And usually if you have it when you are young, it's good because you care for something. You think that things should be done differently. It is good. But at the same time, make sure you also do other things in your life. Pursue professional career, pursue a business, pursue a family, have a good family. And so long as you think that politics is just a job, people come and go. The same people who say that you are so great today will be the same people who spit on you tomorrow. So if you go into politics looking for, recognition or looking for what people think of you, it's temporary. It's temporal, extremely fleeting. It will go away. You can only focus as a politician if you are very specific about what you want to achieve. That if I go in, this is what I want to accomplish. I will try my best to do it. If I can do it, I consider it as my personal accomplishment, and that's good. But if I have tried my best, I cross my time and I still can't do it, most probably it's because it's beyond me and someone else will continue doing my good work. And after all, progress and changes are incremental. It's a work in progress, one generation after one generation. I think if you adopt that mindset, I think you will be able to stomach politics without getting too personal about it. So I do not know this time around how, the SPR, everything. But what I observe is this, numerically, at most, there are only 40% of voters who support UMNO and MCA and MIC. At most, only 40%. So in any given space and place, any voting center, 6 out of 10 people will be against UMNO and BN and MIC. So if you transpose that to the XPR, to the civil service, of course, things are slightly skewed. Maybe being civil servants, they are more susceptible to UMNO. Maybe they have different view about UMNO. They like UMNO better. But it's certainly not 9 for UMNO and 1 against UMNO. It certainly is so much better than 2013 than 2018. If the public is 60% against UMNO and MIC, and that's a number now and it's dropping, even if you transpose that and you allow some skewness to civil servants, to the authorities, you are looking at 60-40 maybe. 6%, six people for UMNO, 4 people against UMNO. So it is not as easy as before to blatantly do something or commit electoral fraud. And also, over the last 5-6 years, we've become so much better in terms of our management of election day, because our polling and counting agents are better. For PKR this time around, we have an app where everything will be recorded. The Form 14 will be very quickly uploaded to the cloud. We have all the record. The computer will basically compute. We hope that we can call a result of an election faster than SPR announce it. So, as we move faster than BN and hopefully UMNO, it makes it harder and harder for them to manipulate on the election day. And that's always my attitude. You can't change certain things. UMNO will always be UMNO. And some people, some crooks will always be crooks. What you can do is we can upgrade ourselves and prepare ourselves, make us a lot more agile so that we become immune and we have a workaround to whatever fraud plans they have. And I think that's a better way to approach it, and it's certainly much better this time around than 2018. Media asked me before we started, how's the preparation? I've managed the election preparation for PKR for 3 general elections, 2013, 2018, and this time around. I can categorically tell you we are so much better prepared, so much more organized now than before. We have processes in place, we have everything is objective data, we have dashboards on our phone. I actually know who's doing what across the country today if I click on a button. If I click on Sungai Petani, I know how many people are doing work today, as it is. The chief is here, so we have all the processes. We just need a bit more time to rev up the energy of the campaign. Currently, I think about 3,000-4,000 a week doing the campaign all over the country. We need to push it up closer to election to about 10,000, 12,000 a week, 40,000 a week. And hopefully, once you achieve that, the momentum, we get the right momentum to reach the tipping point. So I think all the processes are in place. We just need to get people to run the marathon. So all this hopefully will manage whatever worries we have about election frauds, about money politics, and so on. So one last question, and then we call it a day at 5. Yes. Okay. Same question that was asked by the media, the first question that was asked by the media. The question is, can Yang di-Pertuan Agong rejects the request for dissolution of the parliament? I'm not a constitutional expert, unfortunately. So, you know, the debate about what exactly is the prerogative of the Yang di-Pertuan Agong. Is it by constitution that he has to follow exactly what the Prime Minister recommends? I think, you know, the letters of the law, the spirit of the law, the constitutional debate will continue. But constitutionally, the power rests with the Yang di-Pertuan Agong. This is a question that, does that power means that he can exercise his own discretion? Does he have prerogative? Or it is just basically to consent to whatever the decision to formalize the dissolution. So I wouldn't go into that. That's, you know, the realm of the constitutional lawyers. But what I can say is this. Our political system is a Westminster system. And there is a reason why the Prime Minister has the power to dissolve Parliament. And the way to do it is to bring it to the cabinet agrees, and then with the cabinet decision is brought to the Agong, you know. Normally, in previous circumstances, the Prime Minister holds the majority of the members of Parliament. He commands the support. He commands the support because UMNO commanded the support. So that majority support basically then is brought to the cabinet level, that basically the cabinet is made up of a lot of the UMNO ministers and is reflective of the majority support that UMNO has at the parliament. That's why if you look from that perspective, right, the so-called the legitimacy issue of a prime minister, that's why a prime minister can bring to the cabinet and the cabinet can agree and it can bring to the Agong, and the Agong will all the time agree, because the chain of legitimacy from the parliament where he commands the majority to the cabinet where he commands the majority is very clear. There is no issue of political legitimacy there. That is not the case this time around, you know. UMNO has only 34 seats in parliament. UMNO is a minority in the cabinet. So if a prime minister, on the instruction of UMNO, which does not command the majority in parliament nor the cabinet, brings to Agong, the constitutional question is, knowing that this prime minister does not bring when he presents and submit to the Yang di-Pertuan Agong the request for dissolution, that request of dissolution, the legitimacy of which is questionable, because parliament, obviously, only UMNO agrees to it, the rest of the parties don't agree to it. Cabinet, made up of Bersatu, of PAS, only UMNO agrees to it, the rest don't agree to it. So when he does that, you know, there's a political legitimacy that I think everyone should question. So I think we are on uncharted territory. Constitutional lawyers will argue both ways, this and that. But at the end of the day, I hope common sense prevail. This is not about politics. You know, I've mentioned in my ceramah last night in Sungai Ara, within 1 month, UMNO's support among the Malays plummeted by 9%, from 27 to 18%. I think by end of October, the gap of Malay support between PH and UMNO will be within single digit. Most probably between 8 to 9%, 7 to 8%. That's the first time since 2018 that we narrowed the gap of support among the Malay voters between PH and UMNO. So this is not about who is going to win election. If you ask me, yes, bring it on. I mean, I'm quite confident. We've done all our best. We have 2 or 3 more scandals coming in the next 1 or 2 weeks. So if I'm not dares to call an election as I'm shouting new scandals, go ahead. I'm okay with it. But we have families. And while some of us are very well off, we live in condominiums, in high heels, you know, we don't eat, from hand to mouth every day. We do have some cash. Many people are not like us. All it takes is just one banjir and they lose everything because they don't have 5,000 to buy new things for their house. It will set them off for months and years, if not years. So it's about common sense. It's not so much about, pakatan menang ke kalah ke orang tak boleh undi. I actually don't care because I always believe that if you convince the public enough, they will come out. I'm saying that the focus of the whole country should be to be prepared for this. Don't take it lightly. If it happens, it's Prime Minister may say, 10 people died, lemas. That 10 people is someone's son, someone's mother, you can never bring them back. So my issue is we have to focus to get through these 2 or 3 months. Whatever cash we have, prepare for it. Whatever civil servants we have, whatever reservists we have, whatever army, police we have, we should be talking about putting sandbags, about, clearing river sediments. We should be encouraging the public to know if they were to evacuate, how. That's what we should be doing now. But I don't think, many people listen again. So if they call election, we will go in, and I think we are confident, we are not defensive like before. But I shudder to think what country it will be, at the same time when dulu last year, when there was no election, the response to the flood, and it was only Sri Muda at that time and Baling, it was appalling. People didn't get food for days sometimes. And imagine this time around, the weather forecast has already said it's going to be bad. Some people say, mana kau tahu? Yalah, harap-harap dapat kat rumah kau, padang kau muka. It's like, of course, it's a forecast. But that's why we need forecast. Because the last year when it happened to Sri Muda, we wish we had known the forecast earlier. I got 3 staff who were stuck there. Some of my staff, they duduk Shah Alam, Bukit Jelutong semua. They couldn't go back for about a week. Because total cut off. The worry, what happens to their parents, semua kan. I wish ministers understand this. So it's not about winning election. So that's why I hope common sense prevail. In fact, if I were UMNO, this is the best time to prove that they are more than just greedy for power. That they have some heart in it. That, we will set aside and we will focus on this, So I don't know. I hope common sense prevail. The best that we can do is to prepare everything. If they call for election, we have to juggle between moving our machineries to help the people, at the same time to campaign and so on. And I always say everything else has been decided by the one out there. It has been decided. The best that we can do is to do in the best capacity that we have as a human being, with a good heart, and the rest, I think, we'll see what it does. So, thank you very much. It's 5 o'clock on the dot. Thank you for spending lousy Sunday with me. And I'm sorry for being late tadi, and hopefully wish us luck. Thank you very much.